Ah, those years. Those years of heart-throbbing infatuation, or attraction, or love. Every word of caution and every question of romantic partner choice was met with, oh, but she's totally worth it, or he is so worth it. Sure, the person in question may be a little demanding or eccentric or have strange ideas, maybe annoying habits, maybe an expensive taste, but, remember that? And a few years down the road may prove that to be true. Or experience may help you see that on a different level. And you may assess that worthiness just a little bit differently. Now imagine this parent or these parents sitting you down, a young person, for that serious talk. Now this means different things for different families, not the least of these differences being determined by nationality, by race, by gender, socioeconomic position. It seems that these serious talks take on new dimensions all the time, now even including having to memorize your Miranda rights. But imagine these parents sitting their young person down and saying, listen, pay close attention now. I have something, or we have something very important to say to you. In fact, it's the most important thing you're ever going to hear. Okay, so could that be information about which college to apply for? Maybe it's some important information and guidance on the kinds of plays you could do on the football field. Could be maybe an offer for a summer internship at this company that everyone dreams of working for. And it's as if to underscore the dead seriousness of it all, these parents say, now don't waste this opportunity. Don't squander this information. What is that important? Wait for it. It's wisdom. What? Come on now. Can't you just see that snarl rising up on the lips of that young person as they say, I can't even believe that you said that. You've got to be kidding me right now. You're so out of touch. You're so clueless. And just by making that comment, you have proved that you cannot convey anything to me. Definitely nothing that's practical. I mean, what on earth do I do with wisdom? I really don't know what that is. Can't buy anything with it. Can't write that as a qualification on an application. Can't even eat it. And the parents wait patiently until all of that outburst is over, and then they add to what they've already said, she'll cost you everything. And I mean everything. But if you treat her right, she'll lead you to places that you never dreamed of. If you want to live long, you better make sure she's your best friend. Always hold her close. She's a keeper. She's 100% reliable barometer in uncertain weather, and a GPS that knows even the off-the-beaten-track dirt roads. Not kidding you right now. She's awesome. She is totally worth it. Her name is Wisdom. You don't hear a whole lot about wisdom in daily conversation. You don't hear it in media, in movies you watch, maybe not in books you read, and definitely not typically in the news that we consume. You might hear about her in philosophy or psychology if you're in any course of study in a university or college across this nation, or you might not. Wisdom is not synonymous with knowledge. It's not the same as a great education. It's not being smart. But our text urges us not to ignore her Lady Wisdom, nor to discard her, and to actually actively pursue her. But if we don't know what we're looking for, how do we know if we've reached our goal? So to begin breaking it down, consider this information from Psychology Today. Psychologists tend to agree that wisdom involves an integration of knowledge, experience, and deep understanding, as well as a tolerance for uncertainties in life. There's an awareness of how things play out over time, and it confers a sense of balance. Further, wisdom can be acquired through experience, but by itself, experience does not automatically confer wisdom. Did you get that? I'll repeat it. Wisdom can be acquired through experience, but by itself, experience does not automatically confer wisdom. A leading theory developed by a number of psychologists defines wisdom as expert knowledge in the fundamental pragmatics of life that permits exceptional insight, judgment, and advice about complex and uncertain matters. There's another theory about wisdom. And did you notice these are theories? So psychologist Robert Sternberg understands wisdom as balance between oneself and others, so that actions can be for the common good. So that's me and you, and between you, and between us and those in our community and beyond. All of those actions for the common good. And trying to further break down the components of wisdom, the Psychology Today staff writer adds, wisdom is also connected to abilities such as perspective taking, open-mindedness, and intellectual humility. To summarize briefly, wisdom isn't easily defined. Wisdom is a complex interplay between various traits and disciplines and areas of discernment. Attaining wisdom takes a great deal of patience. Patient devotion, in fact. Wisdom is non-binary, so to speak, meaning it requires nuance and a level of comfort with uncertainty and humility. Well, Lady Wisdom doesn't appear to be this fast-paced, glamorous show-off now, does she? Scripture refers to wisdom repeatedly. Here are just two examples. When pride comes, then comes dishonor. But wisdom brings humility, says the same writer of the book of Proverbs from which Sarah read, this time chapter 11, verse 2. Another one. Anyone who needs wisdom should ask God, whose very nature is to give everyone without a second thought, without keeping score. Wisdom will certainly be given to those who ask, writes James, an early leader of the Christian church, in a book bearing his name, James chapter 1, verse 5. Perhaps the person who's most noted for wisdom in our sacred body of literature is the Hebrew king Solomon. In fact, Solomon is said to have written Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. So when Solomon succeeded his father, King David, as Israel's second king, he pled with God to give him a discerning heart, to distinguish between good and evil, and to be able to govern well. God's response and promise to him is summarized with the one term, wisdom. Solomon was known for having great wisdom and discerning governance at his time. If wisdom is characterized by discernment, the ability to distinguish between good and evil, I see a lack of wisdom in our culture, in our governing bodies, also in many of our churches. Why is that? When even entities that are specifically designed to embody profound wisdom and provide impartial justice in our country, if these are even sorely lacking in wisdom, Why is that? In a piece published on his Substack platform this week, well-known journalist and former news anchor Dan Rather writes about members of the Supreme Court. And I quote, "Their black robes are meant to convey modesty, humility, and wisdom. The Supreme Court relies on its reputation, and these days its reputation for humility, fairness, and wisdom is in tatters," end quote. In Solomon's later life, his reputation for humility, fairness, and wisdom was also in tatters. If God promises wisdom to those who ask, are few people asking for it? Are those who pursue Lady Wisdom as their highest prize woefully few? But look at Solomon. He did ask for wisdom, and his request was granted. He was off to a flying good start, adjudicating difficult cases of justice for the benefit of the common good. You can read about that in 1 Kings chapter 3. World leaders of his day, having heard about his renown, came to see for themselves. They were stunned by both his wisdom and his riches. One of those stories is found in 1 Kings 10. However, in his later years, Solomon is the one who writes prolifically about the futility of life. In fact, he says, life is perfectly pointless. What happened? It seems he's no longer the poster child for the one who followed his earlier advice of don't give up on wisdom and she will never give up on you. If you dig into King Solomon's life a little more deeply, you'll discover that despite his wisdom, he succumbed to his addictive personality. He could not control his addiction to women and to amassing wealth. These two excesses at least partially contributed to his despair at life. Somehow, wisdom didn't stick. There seems to be a difference between gaining wisdom and living in wisdom. Solomon was granted this invaluable gift, one that was more precious than women or all the wealth you could amass. But he was unable to hold on to it. It slipped from his fingers, which were reaching for all of those things to satiate his addictions. If we look back at our text, there is action connected with wisdom. Acclaim her. Don't give up on her. Embrace her. Keep these words in your heart. Don't reject these principles. Intentional and decisive action is required for living in wisdom. We will do well to consider the work required to maintain wisdom once we've received it. There's no treasure that can be placed on a shelf without thought given to its care. This doesn't happen with an exquisite plant, nor with a beautiful relationship. It doesn't happen with a musical gift or the ability to paint amazing pictures. Everything has to be cultivated. Is this how Solomon viewed his unsurpassed wisdom? Did he become careless that it would always be there with him, regardless? Because we often regard our treasures as our possessions rather than our responsibility. We see so little wisdom on display in our daily life. I wonder whether we'd recognize it in ourselves or in others. It's rare to see decisions or hear discourse where we can definitely say it's infused with wisdom. Have you ever prayed for wisdom? Since God promises that wisdom is given to those who ask, be prepared to receive it. But then invest in it, nurture it. Constantly watch your attitude around and about it. Cynicism will siphon wisdom away. may be slow, but it's continuous. Selfishness will also stifle wisdom. The common good is a prerequisite for it. Exchanging humility for hubris will drain you of wisdom and vibrancy. Distraction in your discipline will circumvent everything wisdom promises. Addictions will numb your pain momentarily, then take you on an extended detour. Untangling uncertainties, the mysteries of life, actually aborts wisdom. Replacing vigilance with nonchalance will end in an increasingly meaningless life, and it becomes perfectly pointless, to quote Solomon. Our world, our nation, our community desperately need people of wisdom. Wisdom is worthy of our pursuit. Her steady beacon will guide us through the growing darkness. Her embrace will shelter us in an environment of hostility. She's totally worth it. She still is. But she will cost you everything. Everything. Will we choose wisdom intentionally and invest in her consistently? May God help.